second. Yeah, we got 2 minutes. Got another 2 followers while we're speaking.
You're
In
on
addition to you.
Rabbi, you're on now.
Okay. Tisha B'Av is a complex day, multifaceted day, and can be looked at as a day of great insight and possibility and growth. What we'd like to do together is dig in somewhat to the Megillah of Echa, something written by Yirmiyahu Navi after the destruction of the first temple. We'll be very selective there because it's overwhelmingly a compilation of kinot, of painful expressions that describe the destruction of the temple. We're not going to focus on those. Rather, we're going to focus on words that he says at the very end, the words of promise and possibility. So, let's begin. Echa ayeka, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where are you? The Navi Yirmiyah is standing by the ashes of the destroyed temple in the destroyed city of Jerusalem, so to speak. And he's broken, and he's confused, and he's frightened, and he says, God, where are you? And then over a litany of psukim, several psukim, he describes the plight of God's chosen people and how they went from being the greatest, of the most beloved in terms of their existence and their reality, to an abandoned, broken, tortured, murdered, tormented people, men, women, and children. And the kinot, these woes and these expressions of despair and pain, are gone through over and over for almost 5 chapters. And then at the end, there are some very important words, and I want to focus on those. I want to draw from those into a brief little foray into Parashat Nitzavim that might be talking about the time of Mashiach. Many of us believe it is. Many great rabbis believe it is. And let's see where we go. So, headline is, Tisha B'Av is the day of pain and sadness. Subtext is that we are not the pain and sadness people. We are happy people. We are people who invariably bounce back. We go, for example, in the modern state of Israel from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut. We're crying and broken in the hills of Har Herzl, the military cemetery where there's virtually not one person, not one family in the land of Israel that hasn't been hurt by a terrorist act or a loss in military combat. And the sun comes down and we begin to celebrate. So sadness is not who we are, but sadness is imposed on us in this most sad day. And in most of Echa, Yirmiyah describes that. Poverty, abject ruin, complete abandonment, failure, children, men, women, pain, endless pain, almost seemingly insurmountable pain. But then, in the last few psukim, and those are the ones that I'd like to teach today, he reaches over and lays claim to what things will ultimately look like and how they will ultimately be. And it's very beautiful. And that's what I want to spend just a little bit of time sharing with you today. Ata Adonai, Leolam Teshev Kisacha, the Dor Vador. He says, Ata, you, Amonai, God, the merciful God, the Olam, ultimately, Teshev Kisacha, your throne will be reset, and that reset will continue on and on. Where'd that come from? In the previous verse, the Navi, the prophet, described pain and destruction. And then he says, but God, you told us, you allowed us to call you, Baruch Atah. Our rabbis, and particularly those on the more Kabbalistic side of our teaching, are shocked by the word Atah. How can it be that a Jewish person is allowed to reference God with the word Atah, with the informality of you? Blessed are you. You could call God you. Could you call a king you? You couldn't. So how can you possibly call God you? Well, wait a minute. God mandated that. He enabled that. He wants that intimacy. He wants that proximity. So the prophet is highlighting it. He says, Atah, you God, you, the one who's very close to us and wants that closeness maybe even more than we do. Amonai, the term of mercy, the olam teshev kisacha, forever and ever, your chair, your throne will be reclaimed. L'dor vador, from one generation to the next. Oh, wait a minute. We just spoke about despair and destruction. The temple is still burning, so to speak. Yirmiyahu, what are you talking about? How are you referencing this? How will it be? How can it be? Pasuk after pasuk, verse after verse, so many of them following the structure of the Aleph Bet, meaning that they're so powerful and so horrible. All of a sudden, we're going to reclaim this intimacy and this togetherness and the closeness under the context of Amonai, of the God of mercy, forever. And his throne is going to be reset at the top of our emotional and intellectual and spiritual hill. Is that what we're talking about? Could that be? And how does it come to be? Lama lanetzach tishtachenu. The prophet pulls back a little bit and he says, and he calls out and he says, how could you ignore us for so long? How can you forget us for so long? We know you love us. We've failed and we've turned away, but we still love you. And by the way, we know you still love us. Lama lanetzach tishkachenu. For what seems to be an eternity, you seem to have forgotten us. Ta'azvenu la'orech yamim. You abandoned us for an extended period of time. The term orech yamim, which is typically used in the context of beautiful things and berachot and happy things, is used in the context of abandonment. So the prophet is saying, God, we want you back. You want to be back. We know it's going to happen. Let it happen. It has to happen. Why should you ignore us for what appears to be an eternity? Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Chadesh yamenu kekedem. Bring us back to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bring us back and we will come back. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to bring us back and then we're going to come back? We've been pushed away from you because of our bad behavior, because of our ongoing failure, because of our desecration of your name. We're imploring you to stop the pain and to bring us back home to you, Atah. And then we go on and we say that you should do it. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh yamenu kekedem. Bring us back to you and we will come back. Make our days new as they were in the past. Make our days new. Reinfuse our days with beauty and happiness and triumph and celebration as they once were. And then the Navi almost can't help himself. Ki ma'os ma'astanu katsafta alenu ad ma'od. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's been so bad. We know we failed. We understand the failures. But it's been so bad. Your disgust has been felt by us so completely, it's virtually broken on us. Katzavta alenu ad ma'od. You bore down on us to the almost unlimited degree. So let's take a step back. What went wrong? What went wrong? What was the failure? Rabbi Soloveitchik writes something famously when he takes a look at Shiva Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, all of which happened and all of which led up to it. And he says something profound and extremely, extremely important to us. He says, the failure wasn't in the abhorrent desecration of people and institutions by committing the cardinal sins in the first temple. It's true. People committed cardinal sins. But what does that have to do with destroying the temple? For a cardinal sin, you get punished related to the failure that the person did in committing that sin. What is a cardinal sin? Whether it be murder, as horrific as that might be, or inappropriate relations, or idol worship in public. What does that have to do with destroying the people? With destroying the country? Doesn't make any sense. And you want to talk about Second Temple? Well, we coined this concept called Sinat Chinam. What does that even mean? How can hatred be baseless? How can it be baseless? Baseless hate? What does that mean? How can it be? How can a human being hate somebody for no reason? How's that possible? I don't know if it's possible. People struggle with it. Sinat chinam, and the antidote is ahavat chinam. Can I love someone with no basis, with no platform, with no connection? How is that possible? Hard to say, hard to conceptualize, hard to live. So the Rav goes back one step and he says something fantastic. He says, you know what the failure was in the first temple? It was the failure of will. It was the failure of the will, the collective will. And he says, you know what? You want to draw it back to the time when the luchot, the tablets were destroyed, or the golden calf happened? That was the same thing. It was a failure of the collective will. When the people are not able to come together as empowered individuals and act and do, you have wanton murder. You have wanton sexuality. You have horrific societal behavior. Because the individual will that begets the collective will is absent. And that's what the Rav is saying. Why did we have the failures in the desert that we also memorialize on these days? Because of the failure of the individual and collective will. Why did we have the issue of the spies, of the Meraglim? Because of the failure of the 10 individuals, as a group, and then as the people who embraced their failed anti-God perspective. So you want to step back? You want to understand these days on a serious level? You have to go to me. Am I strong? Am I going to be part of the solution? Have I made claim to my will to be a builder? To break through the pain, to break through the injustice, to create new lines of justice, unseen before. It's not acceptable to be a good guy. It's not enough. I have to be a great guy. And what does great mean? Doesn't mean I'm in the newspaper. It means I put real facts on the ground where I garnered my strength, my fledging self-empowerment to say, this ain't right. And I'm going to change it. And you know what? All those cynics we've talked about before and told you, get rid of them. You can line them all up because I'm going to push them all to the side. So, I want to take a step back. and I want to frame it very clearly. The failures that brought about the repeated destruction on these horrific days, the repeated failures that brought about the destruction on these days was not about the specific bad act. It was about the individual failure of the will and the collective failure of the will. If one person is standing up and says, I'm defeated, and nobody else stands up and tells him, no, you're not. If a group stands up and says, we're going to destroy, or we're simply going to do nothing, and nobody stands up and says, oh, we certainly are going to do plenty, then we have destruction. Passivity yields destruction. That has to be clear. Good. So what the Navi talks about, and when we end this Megillat Echa, is again with the phrase, we repeat the popular phrase, the emboldening phrase, Hashivenu Adonai lecha v'nashuva, God, please return to us, Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem, bring back the days of what was. Good. So that's our overview. I want to talk about two specific things. One is, how do I reclaim my sense of empowerment, my ability to master my will and my movement forward to be a builder? The first thing I do is I think about Tisha. I think about change. I think about reclaiming. And let's briefly, we'll talk about this more in depth as we get closer to the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, but let's briefly go into the steps of Harambam, of Maimonides, the 5 steps of Teshuvah, which somebody who's been passive, or somebody has been an accomplice, or somebody who hasn't spoken up must claim in order to reclaim that power of the will, the power to do. Harambam first qualifies it by saying, the first problem is hakarat hachet. What does that mean? I have to be honest enough to say, here's where I'm stumbling. Now let's be clear. Harambam doesn't write hakarat ha'avon, the recognition of the implicit, thoughtful, direct bad action. He says hakarat hachet. The chet is that subtle thing. The thing that happens because I wasn't looking, because I wasn't thinking, because I wasn't scrutinizing enough. The chet is the thing that comes from laziness, or lack of attentiveness, or lack of action. So Harambam says, you know what? You want to be part of the solution, and you want to have a great life, but in our context, you want to be part of the solution. The first thing is, be honest enough and objective enough to call out that subtle, not catastrophic. It's not the catastrophic thing. It's the small thing, the small stuff that adds up to suck a person's will away and to make him or her a non-doer. So the first thing is hakarat hachet. And by the way, an underpinning to this is very important. Harambam never, ever thinks in the context of emotion. No emotion. When we confront that thing that came as a result of lack of awareness, laziness, rationalization, it's a completely objective confrontation. It has nothing to do with browbeating, with self-judgment, with guilt, with any of these absolutely non-Torah concepts. Emotional guilt has no place in Judaism. We imported it from elsewhere. So when Harambam writes that the first step is an acknowledgement of that subtle area of failure that probably no one will notice, but you must, that's objective. I could be doing more. I could be knowing more. I could be refining this. I could have not said the but. at the end of the sentence. I could have made my tone more encouraging. I could have engaged that person looking him straight in the eye. I could have learned that halakha, that law in Judaism, to make me more competent in that respect. I just got lazy. That's chet. So Harambam, Maimonides, the first step is be honest enough and objective enough to acknowledge the failure. And it's not deliberate and it's not catastrophic. We sweat the small stuff because it's all about the small stuff. Step 2, he says, is azivat hachet. Azivat hachet is a cold turkey, hard stop. I'm doing something wrong. It's not who I really want to be. I'm going to stop it. Well, what do you mean? I don't have a plan. I may go back to it tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Today, it's a hard, cold, irrational, unsustainable, unsupportable stop. And you know why Harambam pushes that and mandates that? And you know why we do it? Because that stop takes me out of that zone. It removes me. It gives me a little air. It gives me a little breathing room. So the second step is just stop doing it. I know I can't perpetually stop because I haven't figured out why I do it. But for now, for the minute, stop. And that's a very big thing. The next step is the real meat. And that's called Kabbalah La'atid. And that's where a lot of people have a tough time. That means I not only confront the things I shouldn't be doing, or the things I'm not doing but should, but I get serious and I confront the reasons I'm not doing them. Most of the things that people focus on, what they're trying to change and grow, are the symptoms. I'm going to stop my anger. I'm going to be more demanding on myself in terms of my concentration and my tefillah and my prayer. I'm going to work on myself more so I don't push away or rationalize away my saying of Kriyat Shema al Amitah, of the Shema prayer before I go to bed at night. Most people, when they engage this process, they go for the topical stuff. They go for the symptoms. They don't drill past the symptoms and say, well, why do I say those kind of things? Why? What's the core issue in me that precludes me from having more intent and focus in my tefillah? I'm not just going to stand in a quieter place. Of course you should do that. But I'm going to challenge myself because the reality is, dear friends, that our neshamot are put here with a handful of core things that we take a lifetime to build on and to fix. And most of the things we fail in are the surface expressions of those core areas. Anger is a symptom. Anger comes from something else, something deep inside my soul and my psyche that has to be addressed. Laziness, insecurity, lack of confidence, these things are all surface things. So when I say Kabbalah La'atid, what I should be doing is making an attempt to drill down, go below the surface to the truest of me, and try to identify the core reasons why I continually make these day-to-day mistakes, or I rationalize away these day-to-day possibilities for growth, and like that. And what you will find over time, and it took me a while to get here, but now I've been doing this repeatedly, what you find over time is that it's the same 4 or 5 core things in your heart, in your mind, in your soul that have to be fixed. The things that bring me pain in my life, where I fail, large or small, go back to the same handful of things that were probably in me from my last Gilgul, from my last time around. And how do we hit a home run in this life? Or the better, close to a home run? We drill down, we have the honesty and the rigor to figure out the core issues. And of course, we do it objectively. So step 3 is Kabbalah La'atid. I articulate the issues inside my heart. And then it's vidoy bapeh. And most people connect these two. So let's connect them. In my vidoy bapeh, I'll stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and myself, and I will state that I want to distance myself from this issue, or why I want to make claim to this area of growth. Here's the reason I believe I failed. Here's my plan for the future. The vidoy bapeh is the reason I believe I failed. The Kabbalah La'atid is what I'm going to do for the future. I say them together. I proclaim them together to me and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in my prayer. And the last step is what most people mistranslate, because again, you've heard me on this over and again. We do not translate from Lashon HaKodesh, from ancient Hebrew. We go to the core, the root of the word, and we interpret. The last term that Harambam brings is charata. Charata does not mean remorse. Charata means retrospection. We called that in the business world a post-mortem. So at the end of the process, where I acknowledged an area of lack of growth or failure, or both, large or small, I immediately stopped. I disengaged to give me some space and time to think. And then I put together a plan for the future, and I articulated it to God and to me. Then what do I do at the end? God forbid, I never claim remorse. What I do at the end is I retrospect and I objectively, logically consider how much richer and happier and more beautiful my life would have been had I not gone to this wrong place. And had I built the things that I know I really want. So, one of the things that we can, and God willing must, take out of Tisha B'Av is to confront our own failures of will. Where have I failed my will? Where has my will, my ratzon, the truest expression of me, wanted to grow, wanted to be, but I didn't have the oomph to get there. I didn't have the resolve. I manipulated, I rationalized, I took myself out of it. That's your Tisha B'Av crux. That's your Tisha B'Av core of failure. The failure of the individual and collective will. We want to end Tisha B'Av, lay claim to greater resolve, to courage, to movement, to ambition, to power. Good. Let's touch on one more point and we'll wrap up. In Parashat Nitzavim, and we'll mention it today, even though it's absolutely in the Chumash, and we typically we do not study Torah from the core Torah sources on Tisha B'Av. We're going to mention it today because it speaks directly to what was referenced in Megillat Echa. In the 30th chapter of Devarim, the book we just began reading, in the first pasuk, we see something fascinating, and we'll learn this in depth, but here again, I want to touch on it so you have an understanding of it, at least a beginning understanding. I'm going to read a few of the psukim. Vayaki avo alecha kol hadvarim ha'eleh, haberacha va'kilaleh asher natati lefanecha. And there will be a time when all of these things come upon you. This is at the end of a litany of good things and other things. And Moshe Rabbeinu describes, there'll be a time when these things will be imposed on you, both the good and the opposite. Vashivota el levavecha b'chol hagoyim asher hidichacha Adonai Elohecha shama. Something remarkable happens, spontaneously, without any fantastically dramatic event. You, the Jewish people, individually and collectively, would have experienced a lot of the beracha and opposite, and just suddenly, without reason, without logic, without a great sense of understanding, you'll begin to gravitate back to me. The famous words from the Shema. You will return to your hearts, to the truest you. Where are you going to do it? You're not going to do it when you're back in the land and when you're inspired and sensitized by the greatness of the Afad Eretz Yisrael, Avirat Eretz Yisrael, the dirt and the air of the greatest country of our land of Kedusha. You're not going to do it there. There's going to be a spontaneous awakening coming out of nowhere when you're in the midst of the Goyim, and you're going to return to your hearts. Not clear that people are going to be returning to Torah in droves at that point, but there was going to be some level of awakening. And Moshe Rabbeinu continues, Shavta ad Adonai Elohecha, v'shamata b'kolo k'chol asher anochi mitzavacha hayom, ata ubanecha, b'chol levabecha, b'chol nafshecha. And then what happens, there's another something that comes from nowhere. It's a more deepening of a return, of an emotional, spiritual, psychologically reclamation of self, reclamation of my love of God and my wanting for Him to be inside me. V'shamata b'kolo. We know that the word kol, and we'll talk about this more when we go towards Yamin Noraim and the kolot of the shofar. The kol is raw sound. It doesn't have words. It doesn't have a detailed message. It's just a raw sound that a person will first hear somehow. It could be the call of the shofar, or it could be some other calling, we say in English a calling, that they'll respond to. We're going to hear this raw voice. It's unarticulated, it's undetailed, it's unspecified, it's undefined, and it will resonate and begin to bring us and our children back with all of our hearts and with all of our efforts and with all of our energies, as detailed in that idyllic description of our love of God and self in the Kriyat Shema. And then, V'shav Adonai Elohecha, et shevutcha v'chamecha, v'shav v'kibetzecha mikol ha'amim, asher hifitzecha Adonai Elohecha shama. When this calling starts to articulate, starts to materialize from nothing, from nowhere, seemingly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins to bring people home. And they're not necessarily coming home to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel for Torah. They're just coming home. The early Zionists were not religious. They weren't Shomer Shabbat. They were the opposite. What brought them to a miserable, forlorn country surrounded by 100 million Arabs? What brought them to starve, to be inflicted with disease, struggling to eat? What? A longing for Zion? Very, very hard to understand. But that's how it happens. And that's how the Navi describes it. And it's remarkable. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring us back. And He will ingather us. The state of Israel, and I've mentioned it before, and I checked today because my stats were wrong. I was understating the miraculousness of it, is one of the most eclectic populations in the world. People from 150 countries. 150 countries make up the population of the state of Israel. The most eclectic country in the world is the United States, and they have people from 200 countries. So Israel is one of the most eclectic. People come from everywhere because they have some calling that they don't understand. That will happen. Like it was in the former Soviet Union. Millions of Jews, God forbid, written off to their Judaism, murdered by the Nazis, and then prosecuted and pushed far, far away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu by the communists. Millions. awakened, came back. It's a process. They're building, they're growing. Their children and their children's children are Shomer Torah Mitzvot. And on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring us back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will circumcise our hearts. And then ultimately, we will reclaim our place as God's beloved people. And His heart will be mended, as will ours. And we will love Him with every ounce of our being all day long. So, let's pull the pieces together. The separation, the sadness, nobody wants it. God never wanted it. We don't want it. We want to be celebrating. We want to be dancing and rejoicing at the feet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's throne. We failed. We failed to understand what it means to act, whether it be a collective action, like stopping people worshiping a golden calf, or talking down leaders, even though they're leaders, who were kofrei be'ikar, who came out and revolted against HaKadosh Baruch Hu by dragging His promised land and vilely speaking about it. We failed, individually and collectively. We failed at the time of the first temple, when society decayed. Where were the righteous? Where were the leaders? Where was the common man? Where was the common woman? Why didn't they speak out? We failed again at the time of the second temple. And we continue to do so, unfortunately. There's a massive voice in each individual and in the collective that is not yet heard. There's still too much pain within the Jewish community and the greater world that we can fix. There's still too much sadness. There's still too much illness. There's still too much poverty. There's too much. The individual and the collective will must be reawakened, and we must build. And when we start, there'll be this remarkable, illogical, unnatural change where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will begin to pull us together, even though we don't even understand it. We haven't fully committed back to Torah Mitzvot. But He brings us as a loving Father would, a Father who loves beyond what we could ever describe. That time is now. Those days are real. It's time to finally get rid of Shivat Tammuz and certainly to get rid of Tisha B'Av as they are, and to turn them into the days that they will ultimately be, and we can make the ultimate now, which is days of celebration. How is that going to happen? We got to be better. We got to do better. We've got to learn more. We've got to know more. Our individual wills have to be strengthened, have to be resolved, have to be resilient, and have to achieve. I have to reach beyond myself and go. That's what it's about. And when that happens, and as it happens, and we're seeing it, because it's already taking place in the Jewish community, but we've all got to be leaders. We've all got to be champions to it. When it happens, the feeling of the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu will begin to bubble up with everyone and everywhere. We're seeing it. We're at a spectacular time. Let's not leave this 3 weeks of sadness having not changed. Let's not leave this period of mourning sitting on the floor and crying and not be different. We must change. We must change, and we can, and we will. Thank you all for joining us today. Shetizku kulanu, which all merit the full beracha of Shivat Zion, all of us coming together in our homeland in Eretz Yisrael with a full, complete Bet HaMikdash, b'mehera b'yameinu, amen.